lot. You sit back, everything's there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a floating.
So she
You did it last time. What did you do?
I didn't say anything. I just kind of
yeah,
mumbled
no,
some
you
stuff.
don't have to.
This time, quorum's present, so we'll call the meeting to order. Is there anyone that would like to offer an invocation? Yeah.
Let's bow together. Good and gracious God, we thank you for your goodness and kindness. We thank you for your love and your mercy. We thank you for your grace. Father, we thank you for those that you have given in leadership. We ask tonight for wisdom. Your word says that when we lack wisdom, we must ask of you. And your promise is that you will give liberally. And so we ask for wisdom for this city commission tonight. We ask for grace, mercy on them as they protect our constituency and as they bear the sword. Father, we thank you for your goodness, for your kindness, for your love, your mercy, and your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners.
Bear the sword.
I am informed that this raucous crowd is all here for the orphan train proclamation this evening. So we're not in trouble with them for anything. There are no changes or additions to the minutes. And I think before we proceed further that you and I have a photo op here, Commissioner Ash.
Oh.
Get out of the way.
Okay.
Jokes out of me, so I'll just say with real sincerity here, that it's been a great pleasure, and you've heard Ms. Gavel, done very well for us. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. The pleasure has been mine. I've enjoyed it.
Move on to the approval of the minutes, the January 4th, 2017 meeting.
I'll make a motion, we accept them.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the January 4th, 2017 meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes. Moving on to financial matters, the appropriation ordinance number 1.
Yes, check number 64016, the Prairie Land Electric Co-op for electrical service. Is it normally that high? This seems a little bit higher than normal, the 25,000. Is that in the right range? Okay, okay.
And we had the snowflakes too, so that always adds a little bit.
Okay.
It's usually around 20.
Okay, okay. Just it seemed kind of high for December, but all right. And then I was wondering if I could get restitution from Corner Liquor too. 170.
No, that's not what that means.
Okay. Just curious.
I'll move we approve appropriation ordinance number 1.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Pounds, seconded by Commissioner Parker to approve appropriation ordinance number 1. All those, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes. At this time, we'd like to open up for any public comments. Seeing none, we'll close public comments and move on to proclamations.
Let me just preface this a little bit and mention that we're here tonight for this proclamation concerning the orphan train complex and proclaiming Concordia to be the orphan train town. Thanks to the people back here seated behind me, many of whom literally built the place with their own 2 hands, and all of whom have contributed immeasurably to this museum, which has been recognized as an extremely fine facility and will continue, I think, to be so. And it's someplace that we take our friends when they come to town. I'm sure we all do that. So it's wonderful to have. And it didn't just happen. It was a vision of these folks, and it was a product of their hard work. And I wanted to particularly note that we have one person sitting here tonight who has been, probably if you point to a single prime mover, the single prime mover to the two best cultural institutions in this community, the Brown Grand and the Orphan Train, and that would be Sue Sutton, who is seated back here. And so to go on a little bit more just about the proclamation, what we have seen the Orphan Train grow into is a branding effort for our town. You might recall that a couple of years ago, a gentleman named Roger Brooks came and toured the town and talked to us about the importance of branding and the importance of signage and making the community open and navigable. And we're working still on some of those things. The branding idea, which we'd already been talking about, took on some steam then. There's been a lot of discussion. It's an easy thing to talk about, but a hard thing to do, because you want something that is genuinely singular about the town, and it's not forced or contrived, and it's not just a great place to visit. When Shaylee George started working on coupling these statues with the locally made by Leduc memorial story about an orphan, it became apparent very fast we were really onto something. The community has responded amazingly and still is. There's a large number of more statues besides the one we have here for you this evening on order or under discussion. So I think it's going to really be taking off, and therefore we have started off on this branding effort calling Concordia the Orphan Train Town, and this proclamation tonight is part of that. If you haven't been north of town lately, the viaduct over the sign, the big sign billboard, as you come in from the town from the north, now says the Orphan Train Town. Has a big picture of a train with a bunch of orphan children in front of it. It's very poignant. So we're going to be seeing a lot of that, and we have high hopes for this effort. Do you want to do the unveiling now, Jillian, or after I read this?
We can do it after, as we.
Okay. Well, we'll get my part out of it, and she'll be much more interested in hear of it. So, if I may, proclamation. Whereas the city of Concordia is proudly the home of the National Orphan Train Complex, whose mission is to collect, preserve, interpret, and disseminate knowledge about the orphan trains and the children and agents who rode them. And whereas the National Orphan Train Complex provides collections, exhibitions, programming, and research that engages riders and their families, researchers, and the general public, and creates an awareness of the orphan train movement. And whereas the National Orphan Train Complex received more than 5,000 visitors in 2016, and whereas between 1854 and 1929, an estimated 250,000 orphaned, abandoned, or homeless children were placed out during the orphan train movement and sent by train from New York and other East Coast cities to rural communities across the United States and multiple other countries. And whereas the orphan train movement is one of the largest social reform relocation efforts in our nation's history and the beginning of documented foster care in America. And whereas at least 3 orphan trains made stops in Concordia and numerous orphan train children were taken in by residents of the area. And whereas citizens of the city of Concordia have demonstrated their engagement with the National Orphan Train Complex by providing statuary and plaques throughout the community to commemorate the lives of orphan train riders. And whereas it is the desire of the governing body to recognize and promote the city's identification with the orphan train movement. Now, therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Concordia, I do hereby proclaim that the city of Concordia is hereby designated the Orphan Train Town, and hereafter may be recognized and announced as such.
Ms. George?
Oh, gosh. All right. Well, thank you. I'm kind of crying. I do that a lot, you know. Well, the honors go to you to unveil. I'm sorry there's not 5. But who wants to go first? You can
I'll do
unveil
it.
whichever one you want to do first, and I'll tell you a little bit about who's who. Go with the big one, of course.
The little presents are the ones
Alrighty.
you go after.
That is, well, her birth name was Alberta Cole. Her adopted name was Roberta, and she went by Happy. She became Roberta Happy Slifer. And so she was placed out with her siblings. They rode the train to Kansas, and it was one of my first duties as curator to go with Wanda Phillips to Marion, Kansas to attend her funeral. And I quickly realized that part of my job as curator, this late in life, I guess, in the time, that a lot of my job would be, you know, comforting families on their loss of their orphan train rider. But it was my great honor to attend her funeral, and it was so funny to me that the pastor who was in charge said, I didn't know her name was Roberta until about 10 minutes ago when they told me, because she went by Happy, because that's what he called her for 10 years. And it was because she had developed polio twice. And so that's where the crutches come in. And she was an adult when she developed polio, but the Rotary Club is her sponsor. So it ties in rather nicely. But she spent 5 years in an iron lung. And also, can I apologize for my glasses? I have a migraine. So that's why, fluorescent lights. But she spent 5 years in an iron lung, and that's where she got the nickname Happy, which, God bless her. If you've ever seen an iron lung, I've only seen them in museums. And she had one child before she went into the iron lung, and she was never able to have any more children. And I got to meet her daughter at her funeral, and her daughter said because her mom was an orphan train rider, she went on to be a foster care mother. And she saw 73 different kids through her home. And so it was a full circle moment for both Wanda and I. We cried a lot that day, and a lot of it was happy tears. We also got to meet her niece and nephew. And it turns out that there were a lot of Cole children in that family, and there was a mistake made that day. She was adopted with her twin brother. They were Albert and Alberta. They became Robert and Roberta, so they stuck with the trend when they were adopted, and they were 3 when they were taken off the train, and they got a new pony when they arrived at their home, treated very well. But their little brother, who was taken in Marion, the family thought they had taken another sibling, when they took a little girl off the train too. Turns out they made a mistake. It wasn't a Cole child. Her name was Mercedes. They just assumed she's still alive in Wichita and hopefully coming to visit very soon. We were told by Happy's nephew when he came to visit a few months ago that we just better have a tape recorder ready because she doesn't stop talking. So we're very excited. And so hopefully she'll get to see her sort of adopted sister and her statue here soon. So that is Roberta Happy Slifer. So who's next?
Small one.
Great choice. He was buckled up in my front seat a couple times.
Oh, my.
And he is Hallie Garwood. And he's extra special because if anyone knows Jim Garwood from here in town, that's his grandson. And Jim Garwood lives in the same house on the same farm that Hallie grew up in. And so Hallie arrived on the Clyde train in 1911 and was taken in by a very loving couple who had been married for 11 years and had not been able to have kids. He was 13, and his story will be in tomorrow's paper, correct, Lori?
Yep.
Because she just wrote the article today. And he was taken in, and then the picture that will be on his plaque is the first birthday he celebrated with them. And it's one of my favorite shots because they took him out into probably the field to like take a picture and he's holding this cake, and it's probably the first birthday cake he's ever held for him or just seen, and he's very confused why he's outside. You know, why are you out here? And we all have those pictures of like, why is mom posing me in front of this thing? But it's also his first birthday that he's getting gifts, and he's very excited, but also very confused. But they built a new house the very next year so that he could fit, and they had a new home, and it was for him, and that's the same house where Jim lives. And so they had 10 grandkids, but Jim took over, and I tell the story often that it was one of the most special days when I met Jim the first time, and it passed over his face that he realized he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Hallie riding an orphan train to Clyde, Kansas. And it hit me then later because he had come back from helping his brother-in-law harvest out in western Kansas. And he wouldn't be here to help his brother-in-law harvest, you know, and it's the little things. A lot of the times we think historical movements have to make huge, huge, huge impacts that we all write about and we read about every single day. But the orphan train is super special to me because it's the little things that add up to a much bigger wave that we can add together. So we added, the dog was really important to Jim because Hallie had a dog as a kid, and that's what he remembered. And pets are really important to the orphan train riders. Anna Laura Hill has over 200 images in our collection. She was an agent for Kansas. And pets weren't normal in New York City. You could still say that today in a big city. If you don't have enough space, you're not going to have an animal. But they're so normal to us. And so they came out and they finally got to have something that was theirs and something so loyal that was his and probably followed him everywhere. And if you've been to the orphan train, you've met my dog. So, and it looks like that. And so it was really super special to be able to find a statue that was perfect for Hallie. So, next.
Let me go.
And he will go, City Park will have Roberta, and then Hallie will be at the County Museum, just so you know.
But Cloudville, correct?
Cloudville, yep. So this little guy, he stands for 12,000 Little Riders. And so he will be placed at Brown Business Service up on 17th and Republican. Irene Brown and her family were the sponsors. And he's special because she also wanted to help commemorate her mother's passing. And so her mom was a bus driver and drove kids all over the place to ball games. And I wish we could, you know, find lists of all the kids that she drove because it'd be amazing to see how many of those kids have orphan train connections and just how the web, you know, weaves itself. And so that's why we chose to have him connect to the 12,000 riders that came to Kansas. Over 5,000 kids came from just the Children's Aid Society. 5,000 kids came from the New York Foundling Hospital. And 2,000 kids came from other agencies who were placing kids out. That number could rise just because the records themselves are not freed in New York. And so we're working on that. But it's amazing the amount of kids that came here. Kansas never closed their borders to the orphan trains. And they had amazing turnouts for those orphan trains. McPherson, Kansas is one that always comes to mind for me where, you know, an orphan train came in January one year, and they had so many applicants per child that they came back 2 weeks later with an entire other orphan train because they knew that they had parents waiting in the wings for those children. And all of those kids were taken home. And so Anna Laura Hill was that agent. And so McPherson, Kansas, I'd be amazed to see the population who, you know, percentage still in McPherson, Kansas, who has a connection to orphan trains. And he's just adorable anyways with his little bat. So he'll sit there. If you've noticed, if you've driven by her house lately, she's had her area prepared since the time that she agreed to purchase a statue. So we're very excited. All right. Last but not least. So this little guy represents Father Paul Fangman, which can My folks on my board, raise your hand if you met Father Paul. Can you raise your hand if you met Father Paul when he had his teeth in? He can't haunt me. It's okay. He's one of my favorites to talk about because he was just such a character. And I've talked about him to you guys before. My favorite story about him is our founder came back and told us about when he learned how to do cartwheels from her 8-year-old granddaughter. She was very bored because all the adults were talking at an orphan train reunion. And Father Paul came over in his collar and said, "Are you doing cartwheels?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "Teach me." And he was probably old enough that he could have broken a hip. Yeah. He was bald and hopefully had his teeth in. I don't know. I just love him. He reminds me of my grandpa. And he learned how to do cartwheels and didn't break a hip. And and we're really hoping that somebody from the diocese up in Nebraska comes down. But Wanda called the funeral home just a few days ago and tracked down his cousin. So it's amazing the family that we found just through being able to put these statues in place. But Father Paul did come down. He said Mass at Our Lady of Perpetual Help where he will be placed. So the Knights of Columbus, the Altar Society, purchased him, donated to purchase him. And so we're so excited because he was, placed in Nebraska. The New York Foundling Hospital, you would request a child by eye color, hair color, age, and gender. They were all placed with Catholic families. That doesn't mean they were all Catholic when they were born, but they were all Catholic when they left. The day after they arrived, they were baptized at St. Vincent's Friar, and Father Paul was actually born Jewish. He didn't know that until much later. But I just talked to a woman on the phone today where she said, "Oh, the orphan train rider I knew was Jewish." I said, "Well, that's not shocking." I wish it was. But Father Paul, it worked out for him very, very well, clearly. He was a wonderful priest. He served, for years and years and helped many, many people. And so we are so excited that they chose to put him there. We have a picture of him saying Mass in our town. And so he was very special, visited the orphan train. And we're just thankful that he gets to come home now. So, any questions of us? And can I please extend my biggest thank you? It's a dream come true to do this, because the ridiculous hard work. I stand here after 2.5 years, but we looked at our 501c3 paper was filed in 2003. So it's been 14 years. And it's our 10th anniversary since opening the museum, 30 years since the founding of our organization, and our depot will be 100 in August. And so we hope that with this, we solidify our place here. So, and our little people's place here too, because they mean a lot to us, so thank you for letting them mean a lot to you. And currently, there have been 17 statues purchased, with at least 10 others in talks. So we're moving right along. Plus Anna Laura Hill. She kind of counts for like 10 statues. She's that big. So thank you all.
Thank you, Shaylee. I got to see I went out to see the sign I think I shared with you last night. And if you haven't looked at it, you really do need to go. It's quite impressive, and I was glad that you'd given me that.
Yeah.
And I just think that y'all do great work. It's really something that is a draw here in Concordia, and I'm very pleased that we have it.
I'd certainly echo those statements. I'm really excited to see this happen in Concordia, all the hard work that you all put in. I
And
think
passion.
Yeah. And start seeing these statues start popping up all over town. I think it's really going to be exciting. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how this plays out. Okay. Moving on to appointments.
I don't know if you noticed, noticed a typo in my memo, but November 1, 2016, Susie and Steve's terms on the planning commission will expired. They have expired, and we didn't catch it. We had a little problem with the timing on that, so. But they've served forever. They're really good. And Susie, I think, is getting tired of filling these out because she just put several. So we recommend they be reappointed.
I'll make a motion to accept it.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Sacco, second by Commissioner Parker to reappoint Mrs. Tuggle and Mr. Champlin as members of the Planning Commission. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on with the new business of the Broadway Plaza Operations Forecast.
We called it that because we didn't want to confuse it with the budget. You'll recall that we do have a budget page for this that we initiated in the last budget cycle. At that time, the facility wasn't open, and we were largely guesstimating what to expect. So we had enough experience this fall and into the winter to let us make a little better projection for you. So that's what we've shown you. And as mentioned, the one thing that we just absolutely did not anticipate when we were planning is the screen being a revenue maker. So we have a, not overwhelming, but significant revenue source there. When our management agreement was written, that wasn't in contemplation. And there's the clause mentioned in my memo that any funds generated from operations of the plaza goes into a line that can be drawn on by Cloud Corp as our manager to provide for promotions. So when we realized it was going to be a bigger figure than anyone had in mind, we started talking about how to handle it. So our suggestion to you is, as stated in the memo tonight, that we set aside about $8,500 of these funds as they come in over the year. They can be drawn out by Cloud Corp to extend some promotions that they might not otherwise do. And with that, I have Jessica Burke here to talk to us a little bit about what she and Ashley have in mind with all this.
Like Larry said, the money we have generated so far is a lot more than we expected. So what we're wanting to do with the money, hopefully 60% of that we can use for events. That would allow us to have a music series, a movie series. We can bring in, other kinds of yard game activities, rather than relying on the general public and other organizations to host events. Other things that income would go towards would be advertising, not just, in town, but surrounding areas to bring, new people to Concordia as well. And so for, I guess when the warmer months start getting closer, we're wanting to do the movie series and the music series. And with that, it'd be nice to start advertising. We do want to apply for a loan with the Dane G. Hansen Foundation, and for the movies. Movies do cost a lot. They're about $475 just for a public performance license rights. That would help us out. Another thing we'd like to do with, if we could use the 60% of the income, is to hopefully rent out the tent through Cloud Cover with, what's his name, Dan? I think Dan Heist. Hopefully we could use that for Fall Fest. I know this past year it rained. That's an option. And then maybe, another movie night, we could possibly use that. And then other people are aware that that's what it's for and where it can be put.
So you're saying you want to use 60% of the 14,000?
Yes, of what
So in
are
other
expected.
words, instead of 39,000 deficit, that increases.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how much are we going to generate downtown and other income coming in the city?
That is something we are doing quarterly reports on, I believe, with the businesses downtown, which I'm not exactly sure when we are
We
doing
have a
that
set
next.
of metrics that we wanted to go a year, and you might remember seeing that, to try and measure increased business through sales tax receipts and business at the restaurants and so forth. So we don't have those figures, and we don't have how much for you yet, but they had some ambitious goals on that.
So on that, if we go 60% of the 14,000, what's that put our deficit at?
I have no idea.
Could you
didn't-
calculate that for me?
Well, I think that's reflected in your,
I don't think so.
Well, the 39 is the,
39,000, that's including taking 60%
Would be
of
the 53.
14,000 revenue out.
yes.
53 would be before the 14.
All I know is in the last couple of weeks, and I can't remember how long ago it's been, I've actually had to drive around the block to find a place to park, when I wanted to go to a business downtown. Because I thought in the past, boy, you could drive right up to the and it's happened twice. Just seems like there's a lot of things going on, and I hope that figures reflect that from
And with
restaurants.
the movie series and music series, we're wanting to do those on Thursday nights because the other businesses are open later. And then we're hoping to get the farmers market moved as well. I am going to talk with Robert tomorrow, so that could increase their sales as well and guarantee, live entertainment at the plaza those nights, especially those nights.
Just seems to be more cars downtown,
And
That's a good
when
thing.
can we get a projection on how much this is increasing downtown business?
My understanding, we were going to start looking at that after a full year
Yes.
of its operation, so it would seem to me
End of 2017?
Yeah.
Fall.
October, November. That's what was in my mind, is that,
Timing is such, we were just really underway for a few weeks, a couple of months so far. So we were planning on a year's projection, and we see how we do against the goals that we set.
Yeah, and this income is just, based off of what we've generated so far for 2017.
I overheard some of the business owners who were advertising and were commenting on how they viewed it to be a very good value in regards to the amount of money spent compared to the amount of screen time they were receiving. So I think that as more advertisers, as more businesses see the value in that, I think that there's some potential upward growth with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to comment too, I work with a gentleman who sponsors the gun show coming up this
Jim?
weekend. 25 vendors from out of town will be spending 2 nights in town.
Mm-hmm.
And,
From all
and
over.
so I'll be anxious to see the figures too, because I think we'll see a surprising, jump. Right, and that doesn't even count the attendance of those who are coming in, so, yeah.
One of the,
And I went to CZAT, I made a point to go down and watch it. I thought it was, I couldn't get everything read in time.
I think his is 10 seconds.
So that's what he pays for. I mean, it's
He
not-
paid for 10 seconds, yeah,
Okay,
but
all right.
normally it's 5 seconds, and that was
Oh.
actually suggested by the Daktronics sales guy.
Oh.
He thought 5 was generous, actually, 5 seconds.
I'm
And
a
then,
faster reader than I am.
Yeah,
5 seconds.
it kind of really
I mean,
depends
if
on
there's
how
not a lot
much
of
is,
stuff up there, but,
how much
to
is on
read.
your ad, yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah.
and I know that certain advertisers that I've spoken with have modified their advertisements to be more clear and direct with their message.
Well, that's,
Mhm.
yeah, that's good to know, too. so.
We put some things up, and Jessica really worked very well and hard for us to get what we needed up there.
Your videos are nice, yeah.
I think something to keep in mind with the plaza too, and this is something that I've talked with different folks about, is that any income that we generate from the plaza itself is tremendous, absolutely wonderful. But the primary function that the plaza serves is sort of a dinner bell to help bring people downtown and to help generate dollars spent elsewhere. So in and of itself, it's not perhaps the most lucrative business model, but it's serving a greater purpose than that, and I think that was the intended purpose.
For sure.
And October, we'll know.
The other part of that is you have to spend money to make money, and we've put a pretty big investment into the plaza, and to shortchange it now is against what we're trying to do.
Mhm.
We need to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to make it successful. And part of that is having the income or the
Access
money
to-
to be able to do it right.
Knowing that there are plenty of opportunities for us to learn from
Yeah.
successes and maybe things that don't go as well as we hope, but always opportunity to learn.
We don't really need an action from you this evening. I mean, this is how we will interpret the present arrangement for now. Well, probably, the agreement notes in it that we anticipate there's gonna be changes, so we might run it a few more months or run it through the summer, see how we're doing, and just bring it to you one time, and make whatever modifications are necessary.
That's good.
Would there be a benefit to having just a brief quarterly update as we're in this first year to see?
Yeah.
Jessica is planning out quarterly on events.
Mhm.
So this isn't the most active quarter, it's the least active quarter, but we can bring in the quarterly events report as it generates, so.
Yeah.
Sure, I just, as we're figuring this all out, then if we,
Get into April and come back with the quarterly report.
Mhm.
For sure.
It hasn't to be that formally titled, but just informative information. Thank you, Jessica.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions for?
I just thought that it was really nice the way so many people did participate when you had sporting events. I'm not a sporting kind of person, but it seems to really fill a need or a desire in our community. And
Definitely.
anything that brings people together and brings them downtown is a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
So-
I will have the presidential inauguration on the screen on Friday, so
Ah.
if anybody's interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Managers report.
You have something this evening, I think last time I had nothing for you. I just wanted to note, we do have some significant dates coming up over the next few weeks as far as our desired capital improvements for the year. Next Tuesday, the 24th at, note the time, is it 1 o'clock, Ron, 1:30, the bid opening? Next Tuesday? Is the bid openings for the 18th Street project and for the 6th Street sewer project, so we'll know how we are on those after Tuesday. Sometime in February, and I don't have an exact date from KDOT yet, is when we anticipate KDOT will let bids for the hiking trail. As far as we know, we have now completed the permitting that's required and provided them with all of the documents, although they still pop up in my inbox every now and then, please sign this or that. But I think we're set to go as far as I know. And then, given the schedule we're on now, I anticipate it'll be March before we see bids on the wastewater treatment plant. Where we are with that at this point is they are awaiting the final approval from Kansas Department of Health and Environment. They had some very small detail things on the plans that they wanted changed, and those were all submitted last week. So they really anticipate hearing from that any time now. When that is done, I'll have something in writing from the engineers that tells us that it's done and they're now ready to proceed, and lists out in bullet points or whatever the projects we're undertaking now. And we'll present that to you and ask for your go-ahead to proceed to solicit bids on the subject. So by the time all that's done and you do the bids and then you do the contract work after that, probably April or May for a construction start is what we're figuring on. So those are all the things we have coming up, and with some good numbers, we'll have a lot going on this year.
When are they gonna start work on the water tanks?
I don't know.
He's told me as soon as the weather is warm enough to start sandblasting and coating, which would be probably first of March.
March, okay.
And you were saying last meeting that it had to be they were looking for a sustained temperature, or that it had to be.
Yeah, they don't really want to start painting and have cold weather.
Mhm.
Maybe that can still happen in March.
Probably
Happen
April.
in May. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of an ice storm one day and 55 degrees, 2 days later. It's,
What's an ice storm?
right. Okay. Was that all for the manager's report?
Yes,
I mean, I'm hesitant to ask. I don't, no, I was nervous to say something. Just wanted to make sure. Commissioner comments?
I'm good.
I want to thank the water, or the street people, and the great job they did on this ice storm getting out there. I know you guys were out there a long time, and did a good job keeping the streets as good as you could do it. And I know that wasn't hard. It was lousy weather out there. So I thought that was a very good job.
To echo that, I saw him scooping up branches this morning on my way into work, so not just keeping it safe, but cleaning up afterwards.
And just to clarify that, Ron, if they set the tree limbs by the street, the city will pick them up? Okay, because I did have some people ask me that, so it wouldn't hurt to maybe make sure, media, that people know. And I said, well, I assume they're gonna do it again, but, okay. Did we have any outages in town? Power outages?
I heard of a
No.
couple.
I heard Ashley.
Some houses got some service line down, and then some electrical inspections on service replacements where ripped the mast,
Okay.
pulled the wires out of the meter.
And then I heard south of town out by the junction was out for a couple days. That's up and going again though, right? As far as
10 hours.
Okay.
We have an 8-foot branch that danced right between our power line and our cable line. I don't know how it missed it, but it did.
I saw on Cedar, 16th and Cedar, a pretty good limb went down on the house there, so. All right, that's all I had.
I happened to be at a meeting last night at the Orphan Train Museum, and it was brought up that it's very dark over there at night. And when I looked at it, there's a street light on one side and a street light on the, like on each corner. But I wondered if that is a possibility to get, at least to look into it.
If it's on the property, they actually need to do
They actually
that.
have to pay for it.
Yeah, because like at my restaurant, we had to, and the best way to do it is pay for it up front. Because they can do, yeah, because, well, that you could do kind of a lease type thing, but in the long run, it's a lot cheaper.
But the
just
city
to pay.
wouldn't.
If it's on our right of way, then they'll put up the pole and we pay the electric bill, right?
I've always just put them up like on the corners of the intersections and stuff. If people wanted them in the middle of the block, the power company will probably put them up for them and just bill them a little bit every month. It's up
But
to
you
them.
say it's better to,
Well, it kind of depends, like for our parking lot, it was a lot cheaper in the long run to pay for it, and I think it was a couple $1,000s.
So I just had another guy want one in the middle of the block up on 10th Street, and like we got all the intersections lit up, and they want them in the middle block. It's no different. Somebody wanting one in their alley behind
Right.
their garage or something, I just let them pay for it, or somehow they work it together where 3 or 4 property owners pay for it. Put it on one bill, and that one guy that's got it on his bill's got to collect it. So I kind of leave it up to them on that.
okay.
Might be a conversation for Shaylee to have with Ron. or-
It might be, yeah. Thank you.
Well, let's see, was it the Prairie Land, James Kovash? Yeah, he's the one that helped me. Kind of put that together.
This has been troubling me. I had my first interview, I guess this is in my professional capacity, with Mr. Nosker, and I knew that I was forgetting something that was really troubling him, so I sent him a message probably 4 or 5 hours later, and talking about how wonderful community I feel like we're in and how dedicated the staff are. I was trying to go through my mind, listing department by department, and I left out the police and the fire and EMS. So Chief Voss, Chief Johnson, please accept my deepest apologies. I noted to Toby, that's why you don't make lists. You always forget someone, but certainly appreciate all the hard work everyone does. I'm trying to get out of one, Tim. But sincerely appreciate all the hard work and dedication that everyone puts in, and it's just really impressive, and it's a tremendous honor to be up here and try to do what I can.
Too late.
All right, staff comments.
Mayor and Commissioners, every year the Kansas Wildlife and Parks and Tourism send me out this maintenance assurance statement. And what I usually do is just basically you go down through here and there's all these 10 things that you got, the next one, Amber. All 10 of these things you gotta make sure you ain't doing like in the city park, like overhead power lines and things like that. And we have the little plaques on the pool buildings and stuff. I usually just sign off on it every year. I'm just bringing this to your attention to show you that there is a process if you want to put something in a park that you have to go through. Like we went through a process and asked Wildlife and Parks, to put the gazebo there, stuff like that. So
Okay. And would we contact you then for that, or would we contact?
yes.
Okay.
And we did a permit for like the new park that's in the park there, the
Mhm.
playground.
Okay.
So, and then when you get it all done, you take a picture and send it to them so they know what's going on. Because I think every 5 years they come out and do an inspection. And this started actually back in 1974 when they got a grant for the swimming pool that's there now.
Hmm.
The grant was actually for $411,200, and the share that they give us was 205,600. So half of it. And so you just gotta keep it up every year. So I bring that to your attention. I'll still keep signing it off and keep it up. Also, spring cleanup. We're gonna have spring cleanup April 10th through the 14th. I'm just bringing it to your attention, so if anybody asks, you can tell them what it is and have their stuff out by the curb. Hopefully they can put it out on Sunday night and we can start picking it up. But I know people see us after we go by and they put it out, so we usually try to spend the whole week doing it. And then I got one more thing. Tomorrow, I don't know if anybody remembers, before the first of the year, that traffic light over on by Charlie Bowers over there on 6th and Lincoln
Mhm.
got hit. There was a truck coming through the intersection and it shot her across there and hit the side of that pole and dented it in pretty good and tore up a panel on one side that covers the electrical and stuff. I got a company coming in to put that pole in. We finally got it and they're gonna install it tomorrow.
Excellent.
So, if you got any questions on anything? Okay, thanks.
I'd like to follow up on that spring cleanup because this is the time when we meet as the nuisance abater. I try to get pretty aggressive on reminding people and sending out letters, and so I want it to be known that we're gonna increase our efforts of notices and then offer that, if you do this.
Just
But
get it to the
problem
curb.
we've been having, and in fact, when I first came to work for the city, there was a lot of volunteer programs and organizations that were willing to help, with getting an old freezer out of a basement or dragging something from the alley to the curb so that it could be picked up. And I've lost that information or the process. I don't know, and I'd like to ask or let it be known that that would be nice if some organizations could step forward and help with that. Because that's the problem we get, it's back in an alley or in a backyard, and it might be somebody that's not physically capable to, take care of that stuff. So we'll try to increase our efforts to remind people to get those things out there and try to time it just right to where they'll have the opportunity, because the tires and things like that's a perfect opportunity to get rid of that stuff for no cost. I mean, the taxpayers are brought in that, so. And then after if they don't, then we start doing it and charging them, so, and that gets, how that gets, so. Thank you.
Just so everyone knows, Sunday morning at 8 a.m., we declared a disaster in Concordia and in the county with the ice storm we thought was going to come in. The numbers and stuff doesn't look like we're going to meet the threshold to be part of the whole FEMA deal since we didn't get as much ice, but just so it's a matter of record, we had Mr. Lambert sign off on everything beforehand and was kind of prepared ahead of time, which I say is why the ice didn't come, but we were prepared for it.
I think we were 2 degrees away from a real different storm.
Different storm.
I have my disaster badge ready.
Pinned on all right, yeah.
Yeah, I know my sister-in-law in Kansas City.
Walked around the house with it on.
That was right.
Yeah, I think if it was 2 degrees colder at any point.
I forgot about it.
It really
I'd have
is.
done that
There's just
too.
enough warmth to get at the top.
Mayor and Commissioners, the luck went well. We had one accident on Sunday.
Really,
That's-
that's all?
That's all. So we didn't have to use the emergency reporting plan, and everybody drove real well. I'm happy about
Well, I
that.
think most people
Most of us
stayed
just
home with
stayed
it being
home.
Sunday.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to get out in it, but.
Well, there were
boys
some
just
games
drove
to
slow.
watch, you know.
Well, I don't know, but maybe only 1 or 2, maybe 3 churches had services Sunday
Yeah.
morning. So I think people may be getting, if it's bad weather, just stay
Think
stay
about
home,
half
stay
the
put.
But I agree with you, Mayor, that a couple more degrees and we'd had a whole different story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
well,
true.
I was opening, so I was up anyhow, so I drove around for 15 minutes, like, nope, we're not open.
I'm gonna take a picture of the
I
new
knew that.
commission.
I didn't shave, but we did, no, I'm joking.
Sorry. Blue cup, big blue cup.
There's no food or drink in here, by the way.
That's for court, people will allow you to bring things.
Is that the one that goes up on the web?
It's the one that's on screen. Yeah.
I'm gonna cut that back down to 3.
My site is one image, if it's the only image in a playlist, it will play 3,000 times. Even if it is a website.
Any other staff comments? This time I would entertain a motion to adjourn to a study session.
I move that we adjourn to a study session.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hash and seconded by Commissioner Parker that we adjourn the meeting to a study session. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned.
Good done.
Just
Huh?
push on
Just move
through.
on.
Let's keep trucking.
Keep tracking.
Well, the first item concerns,
Thanks, guys. Eileen, when are they gonna put your statue up? Yeah, when,
He's gonna take it now.
cool.
had a chance to look at it before? Have you had a chance to look at it?
No, this is the first time. She just said come and get it from here, she wouldn't have to haul it.
So we're gonna haul it.
Are you gonna take it? Okay.
Hey, while that's going on, I just have a quick question maybe.
Yeah.
I noticed our court revenues are just, headed down. Are we negotiating, are we mediating more than fining, or?
I don't think that we do very much of that at all. I think it's just a matter of volume of tickets that happen to be going through the court system. And we try not to look at that in terms of income, but I think maybe just driving trends, but we have been issuing fewer tickets. We're probably catching the chief a little flat-footed on this. When you listen to this, there's a report in the packet that shows court receipts and that they're kind of trending down. I'm just saying, I don't think that has to do with any different way the cases are handled, it's just the volume of tickets going through.
The volume of tickets are lower than they have been. We don't use a quota. I always say you can write all you want, not everybody does. But if you want to, we can increase enforcement if that's what you prefer.
Well, I think people are driving safer. What are we gonna do?
Well,
Well,
we're not gonna make it up, that's for certain.
Right.
you know.
we're seeing a good presence. I mean, especially in the morning, there's 2 or 3 spots that the police officers park, and the people know that, and so they're driving accordingly, and we don't need more tickets given out. I mean,
No.
I think.
Not if they're driving right.
Chief, you probably have an answer for this. There's the difference between law enforcement and then what's the other sort of principle of, I mean, there's one where it's more about,
Deterrence.
right, I would rather have a police force that's working and the community feels engaged with as opposed to one that
we're constantly running from, and sort of like, you know, not that I would be or any of us would be, anybody in this room would be,
Well,
but
see, those revenues for the municipal court don't reflect the number of warning tickets that are given.
Yeah, I think that's, if it becomes a problem, then we'll address the problem, but I'd rather just be working with the
Now,
people.
the only time that, when the state pays for the overtime, we go out and write the seatbelt
There's
enforcement.
the click it or ticket sort of
Yeah.
Click it
campaigns.
or ticket. We do that several times a year. And there's one coming up specifically for enforcement around schools here next month. And we do put special enforcement onto that.
Hmm.
But, you know, those are $10 tickets, no court costs.
Just pay attention
Some
to
people
tickets.
complain that like it was a felony, but that's the only time we put special enforcement on is in conjunction with the state.
Okay. And the DUI weekends and
Right.
those sorts of
Mhm.
things. Okay.
I have to admit, I worked New Year's Eve, and it was very quiet. We had no arrests up until 1 a.m. when I went home. Had a couple minor infractions that people were stopped for, and that was about it.
Good.
It was a very quiet evening.
Well,
Over
and we're
community, partying days are over. I think I was in bed by 8:30, so. Gosh.
Boring. No, I mean,
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm sure there were
That's-
some out there, but you know, you still have to have a probable cause to stop somebody.
Yeah.
Chuck, and I agree with Chuck. I mean, as far as the relationship, I mean, we want a good community relationship. And to stand there and, you know, warning tickets and the whole thing, I think that gets the point across. If it becomes a habit to some people, then you
We'll
have
address
records
that.
of it and they
Well,
forget.
one of the things that helped is when we publicized the J-turns downtown. I've made a couple of traffic stops on that myself, but usually you stop once and they don't do it anymore.
Right, right. I mean, that's what it's about. You know, the deterrence of them doing it again. I mean, that's the main thing about it.
We did have one accident last spring where the person went to make a J-turn and parking spot in front of Sears and missed and hit a pickup truck. So that, I don't think that, no person will do that one again either.
But still, there's damage in the whole thing, so.
you know, it's been a while, but I think about 5 years ago that there was a police officer that was known for giving tickets that is no longer here, but there was a lot of resentment from certain parts of the community here about this certain individual and his willingness to give tickets. And now that that person's not here, I have not heard a complaint
Well,
in several years.
Part of that came from the assignment he was given when he first came here. I got complaints when he would stop somebody and give them a warning because it was just him. So it was best for him and for us that he went to another agency because of that resentment, because of what he was
Wasn't
assigned.
necessarily
tasked with doing.
warranted, but it was still
Yeah,
there.
yeah, you know, wasn't warranted, but he's happier where he's at.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chief.
Will reflect my time as city judge, as municipal judge for 10 years, and I came away with a very firm impression that the officer who issues the most tickets is not necessarily the most effective officer.
I
So
agree.
that's our philosophy, and we do not sit down and look at these municipal court numbers and talk in terms of needing to issue more tickets. That never happens. We keep track of all the money around here. We want you to see these trends, and I'm sure Amber will be giving us a variety of these kind of things as we build up the budget to paint the picture, but you know, that's how Ferguson, Missouri got in trouble. So
Right.
trying to run the city off the traffic court. We don't do that.
I totally agree.
The Board of Zoning Appeals staffing?
Thank you. A brief memo, but basically to explain it, the Board of Zoning Appeals is a statutory body that is required whenever you have zoning in a community, as we do. Our zoning official, Bruno, has authority to make a great many applications of the code and interpretations of the code. And the appeal of a decision from him is not to the Planning Commission or to the City Commission, it's to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And so it's been this body that has existed for decades in Concordia. Recently, we've had trouble getting people to volunteer to serve on it, and then our last attempt to recruit some people, an announcement, didn't net any applicants. So we have now fewer than a quorum of members on the Board of Zoning Appeals. From the Board of Zoning Appeals, the next appeal is to the court. So this board does have some authority and power and can make or alter decisions that are important to people, so it's an important function. The statutes allow us the option of designating the Planning Commission as the Board of Zoning Appeals. That would not be a conflict of interest because they're not passing on their own judgment, they're passing on Bruno's judgment. So if Bruno makes a call on a code the application of a code provision, and if the landowner disagrees, the landowner's recourse would be to appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals. If, as you follow our recommendation and make the Planning Commission the Board of Zoning Appeals, then they will be appealing to people other than Bruno and people who are knowledgeable about our zoning code and what it means and its philosophy and its provisions. So it's a good group of people to have that power.
You know, just our last meeting, we had to make a tough decision. We had 3 applicants for whatever it was.
Housing authority.
And we had 2 that, you know, experienced folks that really helped us in the past.
Yes.
Maybe we could offer an invitation to those 2 to fill the 2 of the 3 vacant.
We could try that. Failing that, we will try that. We'll check with them, but failing that, I think our recommendation would be to just alter our ordinance and make the Planning Commission the Board of Zoning Appeals, because so in that way, the people who are already sitting on the Planning Commission would be the people who would hear an appeal if Bruno makes a decision the landowner doesn't like it.
I kind of like that alternative. I mean, it sounds like you're good with that, Bruno.
Yes and no, there's some, it's nice to have a separate body to go to sometimes, but it really, if a person were to need a zoning change, that would be the Planning Commission's decision, and they recommend to the board, to the commission. And then the commission ultimately makes that decision on a zoning change. On a variance or a administrative decision by me, if they don't agree with my decision and can find in the rules where they think it's interpreted wrong, then they can appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and their decision is final. Any protest of that has to go to district court. The problem is there are 2 separate bodies that meet at 2 separate times and study sessions at 2 separate times. So sometimes if a person needs a zoning change and a variance for a side yard setback or something like that, they have to go to 2 separate bodies, which is okay in a way, except for it really stretches out the process. It can take 60, 90, 120 days to get through that process. The reason the state law was made is because of communities that can't come up with enough volunteers to do that. And the Board of Zoning Appeals is not somebody that usually meets every month. You know, there's not a requirement to. It's just kind of in special deals. But we usually have 1 or 2 meetings a year where it's an action meeting where they have to make a decision on somebody asking for, you know, one of their decisions. But the part that's I like about it would be you have one body and you can perform 2 functions in the same meeting. You can have the Planning Commission meeting and do the zoning, and then you can adjourn that and have the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting and go ask for the variance on lot coverage, setback, whatever that would be. And that would be, they can make that decision pending the City Commission accepts the zoning change or whatever the Planning Commission decides.
So the
So it
citizen
would-
has to make 1 trip. is what you're saying.
Yes. Perhaps 2 if there's a study session involved, because sometimes you want to have a study session ahead of time so everybody's on the same page. The other part of it is you could have citizens thinking, well, the Planning Commission really doesn't want this, you know, but because sometimes to approve a site plan, somebody may be asking for a variance for a side yard setback. Maybe they got lot constrictions with topography or street access and things like that, so they may need a variance to, the zoning rules may require a certain amount of setback off the property line. They may want to go 5 feet closer. Shortstop's a perfect example. You know, they ask ask for a variance on that. And we get those, and sometimes you need it if you have a substandard lot. You may have to give a variance. The setback could be that a citizen could think that, you know, if one body's against it, the same amount of people are influenced the other. It's the same people doing two different things. And if they think one person is, if they think there may be a detriment to it, or somebody may be kind of against it on the planning commission, then they're not gonna get a decision from the Board of Zoning Appeals that could be favorable. But it would be very difficult for somebody to get a zoning change and then turn around and not get the variance during the whole project. So you kind of got to work those things out in study sessions and see if there's good options and things like that. So it could be easier, but I don't mind. It's fine either way. It's just, it gets so hard to recruit people. And the reason this came up is 'cause we had two good bodies, and one of them's having health problems, and the other one's took a job in Salina, and they're not able to come back and have a meeting. And we may only meet once or twice a year, sometimes the Board of Zoning Appeals. Planning Commission can meet, twice a month sometimes, depending on what's going on. But we're required by our rules to meet at least once annually to review codes and rules and see if there's any recommendations for changes and things like that. So I'm good with it either way. I'm willing to try to recruit that. I never even thought of that. But I've asked some of those people on the housing board before, hey, housing board meets once a month. People get tired of that too sometimes, and Board of Zoning Appeals kind of meets as needed. And then some people, I'll see them on the street, we ever gonna have a meeting? Well, if we can have one, if you just want to sit around and talk, but nobody's applied for any action. So
I
I
thought we turned away two people that
Yeah.
had volunteered for the city in the past and had been doing the job, and,
when we ask for volunteers, that expression of interest has a whole list of all the bodies and all the, Board of Zoning Appeals, Board of Building Trades,
and they may have thought
and we're short on all of them.
serving on one was enough, and now they're
And
not.
some
so,
people do
yeah.
fill out a couple of them.
Yeah.
And,
So right now, we're short 3.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, two.
So that would give you 2,
Yeah.
If they both,
if they agreed.
If
but
we could
I like the idea of opening up to them, and I think it also gives an opportunity for anybody that would see this as a conflict of interest or that it wouldn't be unfair, then step up and serve. If you feel this strongly about it,
That's
then
actually how I get some of the people. They're actually going or involved in a change or in an application for a zoning change or a variance or something, and then they see the process. Troy Leduc, perfect example. He had to go through a process to get his project done, and he kind of awakened a little bit, and he thought, well, I might be interested. So I kept working on him, and then now he's been to a couple meetings. But sometimes Kathy Miller's other example, she was going through a variance process, very involved in that shortstop deal. And then she volunteered to be on it, very good, but she's now working in Salina, so she can't go anymore. But she always participated well, and so we'll keep trying, but it's a kind of a safety net, I guess,
Maybe give it
because
a couple of months and then
we're
we'll
gonna,
be back and change.
I'm afraid to get caught off guard with somebody needing
Sure.
a decision, and we don't have the right to do it.
Nobody.
I would really even wonder if we could approach this, I guess probably the second meeting of February. I'm not even sure that we would need 2 months. It's been posted, but if we're gonna,
You run another ad.
yeah, and with the contents of this meeting tonight, here's your opportunity. And if not, then we can do this.
Okay, then failing that, we'll be back in the second meeting in February with an ordinance to change it to
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Thanks, Bruno. Floodplain remediation efforts.
A couple of you had asked for an update on this. It's been slow moving and may continue to be, but as mentioned, and you'll recall that we have a proposal from Schwab Eaton that was given to us a number of months ago for $62,700 to review our whole floodplain downtown situation and do another calculation to see if they can do any better than the last folks did in terms of determining that our dam does make a difference in the floodplain. And then another $5,800 to submit it to FEMA. That struck everybody as rather pricey when we had it. I'm sure it's a fair charge for their services, but it's just a big job. However, in the meantime, we've had the GIS mapping project going on, and the first thing we asked them to map was our storm sewer system. And then we've been waiting for them to get that on the boards, and they are coming to town on June 30th for a training session, and so we'll be up and going on our GIS mapping after that. When we get to that point, I can go back to Schwab Eaton with the data and say, okay, here's what this looks like now. You know, Ron got still pictures of the data as it's going in now, and it shows much more detail on the storm sewer in terms of size and depth and direction and all this sort of thing than we had available to us before. So I'm going to return that back to the engineering firm and say, okay, with this data, can you cut your price significantly on doing this calculation? And we'll get back to you on that. But any way we do it, it's still going to be some serious money, I'm sure, because it's $25,800 just to prepare the filing, and that's after you've studied all the data and crunched all the numbers, prepared the report. So if we get down into the $50,000 or $60,000 range, I'll be pleasantly surprised, frankly. So that's an expensive alternative. What that would do, if it succeeds, is eliminate the downtown Broadway, or sharply reduce the Broadway corridor floodplain map, and would alleviate that problem, because the reason you're hearing about all this is property owners in the floodplain are getting hit with very expensive required flood insurance bills. Basically, anybody who's got a mortgage on their property, the banks are required by law to require this, and it's turning into a major expense for some people. If we are unable to alleviate this problem, then over the long term, 20, 30 years, we will basically see that corridor dilapidate and empty out, because people aren't going to be able to afford putting the money into those homes to keep up the floodplain insurance. There's another aspect to that that's really not brought up in the memo, but this is a national problem. There are many cities in Kansas that are having problems like ours, or even more significant ones, and cities all over the country. And so you get some political issues at the national level here, and I wonder if they can be dealt with. I think there's probably some pressure going on this. I think it is beyond the scope of anything we might reach out to try to do, frankly, although we can ding our congresspersons and let them know that we too have this problem, and there are bigger cities than us in Kansas that do. But you can get some philosophical issues on why do we have federal flood insurance in the first place, and if we do have it, should the cost be borne by people who are in the districts, or should it be spread across the taxpayers' body as a whole, or should there be different criteria? And you can talk all day about that, but there are ways that you could tweak the statute and basically say, if you haven't been flooded, then your flood insurance is, you have to have it, but it's dirt cheap. But once there's a flood down through there, then you get, you see the rates start going up. And the fact that there has not been a flood since they built the first dam in 1913, except one time when the dam broke in a century, gets taken not into account at all. And the reason I think we might get somewhere on this recalculation, and the engineering company does too, is I just can't get through my head that we can build 2 dams and it makes no difference whatsoever. I could understand that the original dam that was up there, that was 100 years old, did not count, because you would have to get an engineer to certify that it's still a sound structure. It wasn't. But we have these new dams, everybody agrees they're an engineered sound structure. How can that have no effect on the flood situation downtown? And it literally is almost no effect according to the calculations. So I just can't get that through my head, and I think it's worth studying it. The question is if it's worth paying for. When we get to that point, there are ways and means that could be discussed, but I'd like to just get to the point and then bring that up with you. Then the other proposal we've had is to do kind of a house-by-house survey systematically through the floodplain area to determine just how big of a problem we've really got. because there are many houses that are shown in the floodplain map now, but that when you actually do the survey work, can be established that they are out of it sufficiently that they don't have to pay the big premiums. There has been some of that done already. We have 2 proposals from Campbell and Johnson. This is done at my request. I asked them to come up with these alternatives that can provide different levels of data on this. And it's much cheaper than the engineering study, the whole process, but we're still talking about somewhere between $7,000 and $15,000 to do this. For a more informative discussion of what we're talking about, Jason Johnson's here this evening to talk to us about it. I'd like to invite him to just tell you what his firm might do and what their experience has been up to now.
Good evening. I'm going to kind of talk to you maybe first of all from a surveyor standpoint and how somebody just like yourself might look at this as an individual landowner and thinking about, and maybe some of you do own property within the floodplain as it is now. But as it would stand now, just to kind of bring you up to speed and additionally to what Larry said, if you own a property that's in the floodplain and you have money borrowed against that property, the lending institution is going to require you to pay flood insurance on that property, whether it's commercial, residential, industrial, whatever it is. And that's not only true for the Broadway corridor, but the whole entire floodplain as it goes through downtown and then heads northeast and east out to the Republican River. So in our office, as a result of these new maps coming into effect, we've seen individual property owners come to us and ask us what we could do, if anything, to help them out. All right, now I'm kind of drawing this out a little bit, but you'll see where I'm getting to in the end here. So what we can do as a surveying and an engineering firm is that we can go out to their property, and yes, that we know that their house and their structures and their property are located within the boundaries of the floodplain. But if those structures are built high enough, if we can measure the elevation of the floor of the building and the ground where it touches the building, whether it be the house, the garage, the commercial building, and we can say that those elevations are above where the flood water would be if you had that 100-year flood, and that's not the term they like to use, but that's the most commonly known one. So if your house is up here, but the 100-year flood prediction is down here, then FEMA is willing to look at that and say, yes, you provided us the correct amount of information, and then that individual property owner would not be required to pay flood insurance. Now, they could still choose to pay flood insurance because their house is sitting in a floodplain, but at that point they would get the very best premium they could possibly do, or they could choose the lending institution with that information from FEMA would then allow them to not have to pay flood insurance if they wanted to. And so we've done this process with about half a dozen individual property owners, mainly between 19th Street and 6th Street in the Broadway corridor, with varying levels of success. I can tell you that most definitely there are some properties in that corridor that if you had that storm event would probably have a flooding problem. But as Larry alluded to, there are most likely properties, because I've done some measuring, that are on the peripheral or on the outside edge, or are a special situation where the house is built up where they would not need to pay flood insurance. Go ahead.
Point of clarification, though, that with that flood event, that's if the flood matches what the floodplain indicates.
Yes, and that's what
Which is sort of still in question,
FEMA is
right?
willing to use as the measure.
Right.
All right, so, and that process is a process that only exists because FEMA realizes that the job they've done to create these maps is a broad spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to badmouth anybody because everybody works hard at their job, but they know that because it's a broad spectrum, there's probably individual areas where the map is not correct. And I've done some of those surveys to prove that to be true, yeah.
So question, so having that fact, it's a lot easier than to sell it on an individual basis to
Absolutely.
get approved
A-
than it is broad.
Abs-
Because
ab-
everything else is an average, and you'll probably
Right.
never beat the average.
Absolutely, and that's where we see this issue come up the most, is when somebody puts their house on the market, or when that potential buyer goes to start talking to their lending institution because they've got a contract, or they're thinking about getting a contract to the house, and the lending institution says, we see that that's in the floodplain, you'll be required to have flood insurance. That flood insurance will be X amount of dollars, and sometimes that amount of dollars for flood insurance is enough to make that not worth that person buying that property. You know, so it becomes less marketable of a property. And we're not only talking about residential properties, but we're also talking about commercial properties as well, too.
Jason, if we ask KLA if they designed a dam to control a 100-year flood, how do you think they would answer that?
That's a good question. I think they would say, I hate to put words in their mouth.
Well, I mean, I thought I heard the term 500-year flood, you know?
Right.
So, you know,
that's
this whole thing has been
where-
really hard for me to swallow.
Agreed.
But I have come to the realization that we're talking about two different things here now. I think if we'd have a 100-year flood, our dam would protect people along there. I really do, okay? But there's a difference between our dam, preventing a flood and these properties in a floodplain.
Sure.
We could have built that dam 10, 12 feet taller, and that wouldn't have mattered because these properties are still in a floodplain.
Right. And keep in mind, some of
And
those.
we've got to get FEMA to understand
Yeah.
that, you know, this dam should be protecting, you know, some of those folks out there. But
Yeah, and that-
two together doesn't seem to be
And
adding
that's
up.
where our office has kind of been in agreement with Larry is, you know, what happened or what was the missing there, so to speak. Keep in mind, some of that flood water is, you know, not just the water rushing down and say going over the dam, but it's the water that the dam collects, sends into the storm sewer, and then the storm sewer is being encumbered, and then it comes out into the streets and spreads out from there as well, too. That hopefully some of the information that they're collecting with the GIS could prove maybe better that the storm sewer is doing a better job, and then, like Larry was saying, that would maybe be a good cause for amending the map.
Right.
Now, what we were proposing in this memo is, you know, I went, and I apologize if I'm getting off topic, but I just kind of want to give you a frame of reference here. When we began discussions with this with Larry, I went in and just counted how many properties were in the floodplain between 19th Street and 6th Street. And I'm going to refer to my paper here. Sorry, Ron. There are approximately 170 either residences or commercial structures between 19th and 5th Street. I actually went all the way to 5th Street. So that's a significant number. So the question Larry proposed to us is, what percentage of those do you suppose are legitimately in this floodplain, and what percentage of those may not be because they're built high enough or they're just far enough out on the edge type of thing? And so that's when we began this discussion of what would it take to try to prove some of that out. And, you know, we talked about different ways that a surveying or an engineering company could go about doing that. One of them being literally going house to house and measuring some sort of simple, quick, down and dirty elevation, say at the front door of everybody's house, and then compare that to the flood maps and the floodplain elevations for that property. And then we could get, you know, is it an 80-20 relationship? Is it a 70-30 relationship? Is it a 90-10 relationship type of thing? Which would be more than what we know now on a whole, so to speak, instead of just individual places. The other way of collecting that, a more expensive way, was using some more fancier technology and doing possibly some UAVs or some scanning of property that would give us more data. But then you're limited by when you can collect that data because they're interrupted by trees and leaves on trees and things of that nature too. So to do a broad analysis of that, I think the best option is boots on the ground, so to speak, guys out in the field measuring elevations on property, and that's kind of where we come up with the numbers that were in that memo there. Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
And then what's the 1450 where we're using aerial?
Yes, that's correct. We're using some sort of aerial survey, some sort of scanning type of deal. And I've talked to some experts that do that and have done that in the past, and they really, not that it's a bad technology or a bad tool to use, but you have to be very careful about how you use it and analyze it. You know, if there are houses with a tremendous amount of landscaping or trees in the front yard, you're not going to get nearly as much good information from an aerial survey. Think about it looking straight down on a property. You know, a lot of those residences in that corridor have a lot of great big old trees that if you were flying over, it would be hard to see visually, let alone with a piece of equipment. So that's a more expensive option, but one that we wanted to look into because it might be a quicker way of collecting the
Let me
information.
throw this at you.
Yes, sir.
Say you go with the boots in the ground, it's 75, 75. And say you come up with, let's say 51%
Mm-hmm.
or 60%.
Mm-hmm.
Then what would the additional cost be to do them on individual?
Okay, that's an excellent question. When those individuals have come to my office and asked what we can do, it requires me and another guy going out to their property and shooting the elevations on their property, collecting that. There's a whole bunch of information that has to be collected as part of that process. And on an individual by individual basis, we see that it costs those individuals approximately about $400 to do that field work and to compile that information and compare it to the floodplain to know, is your property going to be a good candidate to be removed from the floodplain, or let's stop here because it doesn't look like it is. Additionally to that, we provide the service then, if it looks like they could come out, we additionally will provide the service of compiling the information and filling out the application for those individual landowners so that I can hand them a packet and say, all you need to do is sign on the bottom line, send this into FEMA, they'll review it, and then send you back that letter saying that you would not need to have flood insurance. And that costs about an extra $150. So somewhere between, $550-ish plus or minus dollars. Each one individually can be a little bit different, but about in that ballpark is what I've seen at this point of what it would cost on a case by case individual basis. What I like to do is when those people call in, I like to say, well, if we could do, say, 2 or 3 or 4 of them on your block at the same time, I could give you a group rate and we could break all of this down and you guys could share in some of the expense and I could do all 4 of yours for less than what would be the sum of the whole. That's kind of where we came up with this, 169 residences. If you did that at $400 a piece would be way more than the 75. But if you do them as a group, then all of a sudden you can do more than one for a cheaper type of deal. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does go point. In essence, though, and my feeling on this, if we have a better chance of individually, if we get 51%, and then there's something that we can work out with each resident and show what they could save just on insurance and the whole thing. To me, that would be the best route to go, because we can spend 62 or 65 to redo the numbers, but the odds are FEMA's not going to change because they go with averages and everything else. And if you found 51%, they probably should find 49 or 48% so low that it still keeps them below their average for the whole thing. And I think we'd be defeating our purpose and throwing our money away. And if we're talking just 7,500 just to get that percentage, and that's what you're telling me.
Yeah, that was the
that you
idea.
think in other words, if we spend as a city 7,500, you can give us a pretty good idea of what percentage of that 170 that would be good odds.
That would be
we'd
the
have
idea.
facts to go ahead.
Yeah, and that way, you know, on the extreme, say it was, you know, a 90-10, 90% of those people truly were in the floodplain, you know,
Yeah.
then that would be one thing. But if it was closer to 60-40 or 50-50, then that's half the people you could potentially help. And I think some of it will just be educating the individual landowners. I think some of them, you know, now are in a situation where they've owned their property long enough that maybe they don't owe any money, that this is not an issue for them, not until they sell their house type of thing, or their business downtown. Commercial ones is where you get nicked real hard on that flood insurance. And flood insurance is not just a deal for buying and selling. It's something that Bruno has to think about when he's doing building permits as well too. I mean, he and I have had several conversations about properties in the floodplain and how that affects, you know, how they can do their building permits. So there's advantages for that as well too.
Okay, so Jason, you do the study, and you find there's 110 homes or places that are candidates, then do you go and inform these people, okay, that there's a chance that you should be able to get out of the floodplain? And then is there more expense to them to then have everything? Because you'd said earlier that it was about $150 to fill out the forms. So there would be some additional expenses for the landowner.
There
This
would
is-
be.
And are you thinking it's about that 150 range again, or?
Yeah, or maybe slightly above, because
You'd have to do
there
more
are some
detail.
other things that, the information that needs to be collected for that application that we would not be doing as part of that process. But it would be less than the cost on an individual basis. And you know, this money that you would potentially spend with us, you know, the city would be our client. It would be your information to choose how you wanted to use at that point in time. You know, do you invite all of those people to some sort of town hall meeting and tell them and explain them, or do we contact them on an individual by individual basis? Our office would be willing to work with you guys however you wanted to dissimulate that information to the public, type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
As I'm hearing what you're saying, the thought that's coming to my mind is, I sort of feel like it's the city's obligation to try to challenge the overall floodplain. But I think that it's an individual's obligation to be addressing their specific property within that floodplain. And that as a broad spectrum, I think that I'm optimistic, ever optimistic, that with the floodplain, the FEMA map not taking into consideration our significant sewer system and drainage system, that taking that into account does have an opportunity for us to minimize that floodplain. And then at that point, it's up to the individuals to go in and say, now with this redefined floodplain, if it becomes financially feasible for us to challenge that, with this new floodplain, then we go and look at, does my property in or out of this floodplain?
And you would have that no matter what. Even if the city got to a point and they spent all the money in the world and got the map to change, it may be still that there is still some floodplain somewhere in Concordia that someone would individually have to deal with at some
Sure.
point in time.
I guess my thought is I'm anticipating there being some significant expense in our challenge of the floodplain, and I'm wondering if it would be prudent to do this with our current floodplain if we are still hopeful that we might be dealing with an entirely different floodplain a year down the road. And would our resources be better allocated towards the overall issue than to do this as an individual step now, which may or may not be in effect if these lines get moved in or out or sideways or whatnot.
It's possible.
Although I'd rather
Something to
see,
consider, you know, that our quick and simple study of, you know, what percentage is not gonna be your solution. You know, they're not gonna take our information, FEMA's not gonna take our information and say, oh, dang, we screwed up, let's change the map.
Right.
That's not gonna happen. It's
No.
gonna take something more detailed than that. I wanted to make sure I was clear.
Yeah,
about
anything that you're doing, anything that we're talking about with this specific issue is really just to be able to
hopefully have an idea of our ability to challenge the
Right.
houses or our businesses
Exactly.
within the current floodplain.
Exactly.
Which we are hoping to challenge
Exactly.
at some point.
And then maybe that information is something you could also filter down to the public and try to help them in the meantime, maybe as well, too. If that makes sense.
Although if we stand there and we can, of 170, if we can do 50 or 60%, then all of a sudden, we feel we have that. Not only is it a lesser cost, but we change the floodplain.
It doesn't change the floodplain.
It won't change the floodplain.
No, but it will as far as the owners are concerned.
Yes, yes.
And
If
that-
I could
and that's
really,
what this whole thing's
if I could
about.
really get 50 or 60% of those people out of the floodplain because their structure is built high enough.
Right.
You're eliminating those properties from ever potentially having to pay flood
And then
insurance.
FEMA doesn't have to change.
That's correct. They
Which-
won't
which-
change
Which is
their.
gonna be impossible to
right,
change them
They won't
anyway. I
change
don't
their
care what
map.
people say.
That's correct. They
You
won't
think so?
change their map.
Yeah, I
They'll
do.
just be.
I really believe that.
They'll have an exemption.
Yes,
basically.
exactly.
Well,
I mean-
and
They call it a letter of map amendment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at least we have done, and changed it for those people, and especially any businesses that we happen to have. And that's what this whole thing's about. It's not stand there and try to make a principle out of the whole thing. It's actually to help out individuals.
Absolutely. That's what we're doing
And
in
that's
our
what this
office
all
every
about.
day. Yeah, absolutely.
And then FEMA can have whatever they want. And we've done it at less cost.
Yep. Something to consider.
Well, and then, if I remember, I actually talked to Ken about this, and it seems like he said that FEMA does every, about 5 years? But there's no set time, no
That's correct.
standard, but they do redo the map.
It happens.
Okay,
Like you
just-
said, it's
just
not
kinda
not
happens.
frequent, and it's probably based upon community size and what they know about how many of these letter map amendments have been taken place in. For example, City of Salina, huge flooding problem in a town of 50, 60,000 people. Thousands and thousands of these letter map amendments are done. I know because I've done hundreds of them myself. All right. So FEMA knows that there's a problem with the map in Salina, and they've been working with the City of Salina for 5 years trying to rectify that situation. That's an example of a big committee getting a big community getting the attention of FEMA. Don't know if that works the same out here in our neck of the woods. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't hold your breath to the point that FEMA comes around and decides we want to change the map for Concordia. So to speak.
There's no incentive for FEMA to change the map. The more
None.
premiums they collect, the more they can pay out, which are basically to recoup costs that they've already paid out. But when we talk about no cost, then I just think that we've invested so much into these dam systems that to say that they have no effect, I can't. I mean, I have almost an impossibility in accepting that. Well, this is just how it is. Let's just take it and let's identify individual houses that we might be able to float quite literally above this floodplain. I think that there's still value in doing that. And if I were a property owner in there, I would absolutely be pursuing this in the interim. But I don't think that I don't want to just keep pouring money into this if it's not going to solve it. But I think hearing that they didn't take any consideration into our drainage, and that we're in the process of mapping our drainage, so we're going to get this information. This information is going to be acquired one way or the other. That we at least have to, if for no other reason, take this to try to demonstrate that this water management system that we've implemented is more effective than what they're giving us credit for. We can do things on an individual basis in the meantime, but to just let that go, I guess. I'm not.
Well, to me, that's just ego. And the fact is, what we want to do is help some people out.
I don't know that we can't do both, and to say that it's.
And then we're talking 65,000, and then we're talking the additional to help these other people out on the whole thing. And the fact is, you're right, FEMA's got two reasons. Number one, income they want. But the other thing is, if that would happen, they want to be wrong. And by doing this, it's a conservative way of doing it. And unfortunately, that's the way they're looking at the whole thing. Is there a chance? Sure, there's always a chance. But would it affect everybody? No. And that's what we want to show them is, okay, you got your flood map, but these individuals, and who knows, we might be surprised on how high the percentage is. these individuals shouldn't have to be suffered because of your general topic. And that's the way I kind of look at it. And to me, I'd rather do it that way first, and then we can look back and see what the percentage is, which helps guide us, do we want to go further and challenge the whole system? But to me, right now, the important thing is helping out the individuals that are caught up in this thing right now.
Yeah, what's 7,500 divide that by 170, what's the cost per?
$44.12.
$44?
That's pretty cheap.
Totally, agreed.
Now that, like I did say, that if we collected that if the city spent that information, and then if somebody came into my office and said, I know you are out working for the city, now I'd like to go ahead and make this application, there still would be additional costs
Sure.
involved in me
Sure.
helping
For
them
the
do
individual.
for
Sure.
that individual. But it would be potentially, it would be less than if the city had not done that, and we just, like what I've done with the 5 or 6 that have already come to me progressively up to this point type
And
of
what
thing.
I like about it is you have facts.
Yes.
So
I like
it's
facts.
not an average, it's not general, it's facts on individual.
That's correct.
And I think, and that's something they can't argue. And I think that's the important thing.
To me, that seems like a pretty good investment. I mean,
Yeah.
and like I said, it's facts. They know, they're gonna know right up front
Exactly.
whether it's worth
And we're gonna know.
going further.
That would be the other thing to think about too. If the city were to spend this money to have us do that and say, such and such individual at such and such address calls then my office and says, what can you do? Can we have an elevation survey? I could pull out my files because I'd been there once already as a part of this, and I could say, yes, you look like a good potential candidate for this, or I could say, no, save your money. You don't look like a good potential candidate type of thing. And that would have value.
Can I interject here
Yeah,
just a little
absolutely.
bit? Because one thing that FEMA is really encouraging this elevation certificates, and the reason is because the insurance rates at some point may go to a point that the higher you flood, the more you're gonna have to pay for insurance.
Absolutely.
So at some cases, maybe not, you could know that your flood levels, even though you're still in the floodplain, if you have that elevation certificate, you might be able to get less insurance because they know you're not gonna flood as much as the neighbor down the street. And that's one of the things FEMA tried to clean up with this new program that mapping the whole United States after Katrina was people were paying the same amount of flood insurance whether you're getting flooded 10 feet above your house or 6 inches in your basement. If the houses were equal value, the insurance rates were the same.
Right.
So they're encouraging these elevation certificates so people will be paying according to how they may flood.
So that's,
That could help at some point.
that's another additional asset of knowing that information. I apologize, I forgot about
But
that. Thank you.
yeah, that's just one little thing. And the other thing is $600 elevation certificate gets you out of the next 30 years of your mortgage of
Right.
paying $600, $700, $800.
No, it's more than that. It's probably more like about $1,500 or $1,800 a
Depends
year.
on the value
for
of
a
the
house.
house and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
And it's something that could be done versus waiting 5 years or whenever they go around, decide you wanna look at it again.
Well, it makes your house saleable too. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Property.
I didn't mean to imply that this effort wasn't worth merit.
No, I get that. It's totally good. I just want to make sure
I just don't think that
answering
this
your
is the end-all
question.
solution to
Yeah.
this. I still think that there's
Absolutely. Totally agree.
there's absolute value here.
I agree. We're on the same page.
Do you want us to do the $7,500 deal?
Yeah, I'd make a motion to do that.
Yeah, but
We're in a study
we're in a
session.
I
study
know, that's
session.
why I can't do that. You asked.
Well,
Think about it, and if you have any other questions, you can address them to
asked.
Larry, and he can address them with us. Maybe you would want us to do something slightly different or curtail it some other way, and we're definitely open to working with you guys on it,
On the next agenda.
you know.
Well, and it sounds like that for half the price, we're actually getting more bang for our buck. I mean.
You'll have some real numbers in front of you.
Yes.
My hope with this, if we are going to move forward, my hope with this is that with the information we're compiling, with the GIS data, with the mapping that we're doing of our sewers, if we can get a look at X number of X houses are getting these certificates, that ultimately all this data can go about it, but just as you said, Sam, they can't argue facts. And so if we take these facts to them and say, we can manage water better than you're saying we can manage it, then they're not, well, that's not convenient for us. We get the opportunity to then reduce our overall floodplain. So whether this person spent $500 on their own to get themselves out of a floodplain that they're no longer in, that's still money well spent down the road. But I don't think that we can let go of the bigger picture that we need to see if it's still something we need to go after.
Well, the other thing about that is, once we get this information, then we can go back to the people and say, hold it, 65,000? Hold, here's the facts we have so far. Now give us a legitimate cost.
That's true, it's one more set of data we can give.
Exactly.
Now, once they submit the application, about how long does it normally take to get an answer back, Jason?
There's two different ways to submit it. I prefer one over the other. You can actually submit this information online with varying degrees of success. That's why I'm not fond about it, and supposedly you can get almost a day or two's results. I've not had a lot of success with that. Every application I put together, these LOMA applications, I give them paper copies. They send a paper copy to the FEMA's office, and I think it ends up in their Kansas City office. That's usually about, depending on the time of year, about a 3 to 4 week turnaround, plus
That's
or
not
minus.
bad.
So it usually doesn't hold up the sale or the transaction of a property if they get going on it right away when they know it's going to be an issue. Excuse me.
Okay. But you're saying that when it's been done online, it's almost like it maybe gets lost or
Yeah, I'm
something?
not fond of that process, and maybe they've revised it since the last time I done it. The first couple times I did it, it was like a technical website issue. It just didn't work type of things. I'm still, as you can see, a paper kind of guy. So, yeah. Either way, it's a process that works. Again, FEMA realizes there's errors in the maps they provided, and that's the other thing. This application to FEMA costs the landowner zero money to FEMA. It only costs the money it takes them to compile the information type of thing. That's FEMA's also other attempt to say that we know there's an error with the map. We won't charge you for you to prove to us that our map is wrong.
It's very kind and generous of them.
Yes.
Well, and I think it's, we set out to build the dam with helping the local homeowners and businesses, and it hasn't happened, so I think that we do need to spend that a little bit additional.
Yeah.
When you look at $7,500 to what's already been spent, that's,
Although, do you remember when they came out, when they first, before they finalized the maps, but they came out and presented them to us, and we asked, and they said, no, that's not gonna make any difference. Your storm sewers, it's not gonna make any difference. They told us that.
They've
since
They
rethought
did.
that.
What?
They've since rethought that because I think it was about 2 years ago when I went to the Kansas Association of Floodplain Managers Conference. They made a big deal in their presentations about storm drainage and storm drainage systems and how effective that could be on floodplain management. And it was like a light went off at some point in their thinking was, yeah, storm drainage systems can, because people design storm drainage systems to just
Move.
purely control floodwater.
Yeah.
Right.
Floodwater.
So,
Well,
this
then
whole
that's
system is
new
about moving water.
information. I
And
didn't know that.
the other thing I'd like to interject is, we started the CRS program, community rating system, and then when this dam thing hit, we just kind of backed off because we want to wait and see what some results can be. But everything we do to manage our floodplain, including data collection, public information, can go to help when we get back into this, and I think we will at some point. We'll get rated, and the more points you can get, the more discounts you can get on your overall insurance rates for people who buy individual insurance.
right now, we can automatically get like a 10% rating, but the problem is it's about a 6-month process to go through the whole rating system. And when we do things like when I caught Ronnie's guys out cleaning out our storm drain ditches along 6th Street, I stopped and took a picture because even those little things help your rating. So
We're demonstrating that we're actively caring for our system
we're
and
actively trying to take care of our flood system, our water control,
Mhm.
stormwater control. But the process of going through the community rating system is very technical. It's very paperwork involved, and it takes a lot of time and effort. And you got to keep doing it. It's not something you do once, and then everybody gets a 30% discount on their insurance, and then you don't worry about it. It's an annual thing. They're constantly auditing you. One person puts a shed in the floodplain without a permit and doesn't strap it down or put flood vents in it, then you're risking, the whole system. So they really watch that. And they may slack off. I noticed, since the first Bigger Waters Act came in, they've slacked off on some of these insurance rates and things, and they kind of refinagle some things because of the pushback. So I think as the nation pushes back, they kind of, but it's an insolvent, it's like Social Security. It's one of those things they keep paying out, but they're not getting enough in, so now they're trying to make up for it by flood insurance rates.
Mhm.
Well, what was it, $7,400?
75.
75.
Yeah, we'll have a
I
contract.
mean, that seems like a reasonable
Mhm.
amount of money.
We'll get it down,